gifted psychic medium who offers classes that can help you reach your goals. Refined Divine holds classes Monday and Thursday at her 2 locations and via Zoom. Classes consist of manifestation, learning psychic abilities, shadow work, and healing trauma. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
This is Psychic Medium Deb. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Reach your highest level of consciousness and well-being with metamorphosisconnections.com. Metamorphosisconnections.com is an online directory of the best holistic and metaphysical practitioners to help you make your most informed choices. You can search metamorphosisconnections.com for classes, events, wellness and life coaches, plus metaphysical products and shops. You can also search for a wide array of healers from all modalities, including EFT, sound healing, energy healing, light therapy, ancestral healing, shamanic healing, reflexology, past life regressions, hypnotherapy, yoga, and more. And if you're not sure where to start, the search feature on metamorphosisconnections.com is tailored to help both those who know what they are looking for and those who are just starting. Come explore the possibilities for your higher self by visiting metamorphosisconnections.com. Their experienced practitioners can guide both beginners and those that are already on their spiritual journey. That's metamorphosisconnection.com, your link to direct you on your spiritual transformation.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. This evening, showers and storms possible. Some could be severe. Overnight low of 42. Then Tuesday, clearing skies with a high of 58. Don't miss Sasha Colby's Strip 2 Tour, an electrifying blend of dance, storytelling, and drag artistry at the Fillmore Minneapolis, October 9th. Tickets at thefillmoreminneapolis.com, and listen to The Gailey Show and Matt McNeil Show for your chances to win.
Portions of the following program may be pre-recorded.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story. This is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us on this, what I was going to say, thunderous evening in the Twin Cities, but that actually didn't really happen. Thank goodness. I'm going to say thank goodness to that. For those, I mean, how can you escape the news the last 3 days of this tornado outbreak that was going to hit Minneapolis? All the weather models were showing that this was going to be, especially in our area here, in our listener area, that this was going to be pretty significant. Luckily, in our immediate area, it really did not turn out to be that way. It doesn't mean that there weren't a fair share of tornadoes that touched down just outside the Twin Cities and around Minnesota and other areas. The storm system is still moving through Wisconsin. Everyone, please be careful. This is a dangerous situation. While I was at work today, I was watching Reed Timmer live, and he's a storm chaser. And he was in Minnesota with his team. Some of the shots that they got were absolutely gorgeous, including tornado touchdowns and stuff. And, you know, like we said before when we had Justin Wenzel on, it's like we do not want to see anyone get hurt or their property loss. We'd much rather see these tornadoes develop in an empty field. But you can't help but believe and see the cloud formations. And I saw a lot of pictures this evening that this is all just very beautiful. It truly is. It's amazing how beautiful and destructive all of this can be. All right, so I'm excited. Every time I have on author Paul Blake Smith, first of all, I learn a lot. I enjoy listening to what he has to say. We originally had him on when we were talking about his book about Gleason and Nixon, with Nixon showing Gleason aliens, and we had him on talking about Eisenhower and his alien connection. And then we had Paul Blake Smith on to talk about the JFK assassination conspiracy back in November. with the most recent papers being released by the current administration, I had wondered if there is anything to talk about with this. And I think Paul probably laughed at me in the sense of that, well, there's plenty to talk about. It doesn't necessarily have to mean with the papers released. And I guess maybe I was a little ambitious for Paul. It's easy for me to be ambitious for other people, thinking that Paul could read 22,000 pages by the time he came on the show. Disappointed he didn't, of course. No, of course not. But it is kind of funny because there is so much. So we are going to touch on that a little bit tonight, but there is so much to talk about. And Paul brought a lot of great information with him. Paul Blake Smith, welcome back to GhostBox Radio. How are you tonight?
I'm doing just fine. And just like you in Minneapolis, here in southern Missouri, we had thunderclouds rolling in about 2 hours ago. I wrote to you about this, and they just all kind of dissipated, and we're fine.
I think the reason is because the people need to hear tonight's episode of GhostBox Radio as we talk about everything JFK Assassination Conspiracy. You know, as you and I were talking prior to the program tonight, we were just kind of talking a little bit about the papers, and obviously, and rightly so, you know, you're kind of looking them over, but I mean, there's so much to go through. But it sounds like that it's at the moment, and from what other people are saying, that it's not necessarily a treasure trove of information, but it's also not a drought either.
Right. Let's for the uninitiated, those young people who are not familiar, the government claimed they looked into this matter thoroughly in 1963 and 64 and came to the conclusion that Lee Oswald was just a nut who woke up one morning and decided, for whatever reason, they couldn't find a motive to shoot the president from his office window, right, where he worked at a school book depository. Just him alone, and that's all there is to it. And as somebody pointed out, there's not been a single witness in Dealey Plaza or down below or in the school book depository who's come forward and corroborated all of their points. They can't find anyone who will stand up and say this is exactly what happened when the government concluded this, that there was just one shot. So many people heard other shots that day. And you've seen perhaps some video footage, old home movies at the time. After the shots, a whole crowd of people crossed over Elm Street and went running up the knoll as if to say, let's get him, because they heard shots from behind that picket fence. They know they did. And in Mary Mormon's photograph, if you look that up, she may well have caught the act of the shooter with a little smoke cloud in front of his rifle barrel firing on the president. That's not absolute proof, but it does look like it. And you can make a good case for it when they colorize this black and white photo. It looks like there's a man in a hard hat standing next to a man that might have been possibly in a police uniform, a Dallas police uniform. Well, that would have been one clever way to assassinate the president and then walk away, because, you know, who's going to suspect a police officer? Another one is that on the triple overpass just before the limo reached that part of Dealey Plaza, a number of witnesses said there was a man flashing Secret Service credentials. And in that particular area, and we'll get into this in a minute, I believe one of the shots came from that bridge over the Elm Street, and that it pierced the front of the windshield and went into the back of the car, according to witnesses who saw this bullet hole. And that's about where the Secret Service agent was flashing his credentials. And the Secret Service and the Warren Commission said, we only had 5 or 6 agents in the follow-up car behind JFK. No one on the ground. There shouldn't have been anyone with Secret Service credentials anywhere on the parade route. So right away, this is very suspicious. And I think Kennedy was set up in a rather intricate conspiracy. I don't like conspiracies per se, but I believe it was more than one gunman, and they had to have a patsy, a fall guy, to send over, because when the president gets shot, you got to get somebody under arrest or this country would not be at ease. We would demand, a thorough investigation. So Oswald did fire, in my opinion. I know there are some people who think he's completely innocent. I don't think so. According to the Warren report, he did test positive for nitrates on his hands, and I'm not sure about his face. Nitrates come when after you've fired a weapon. I believe Oswald did fire from that school book depository. And one fact, real quick, I just learned this like 2 weeks ago. An eyewitness on the ground in Dealey Plaza before the motorcade arrived saw Oswald standing at his window with a rifle, and they thought, oh, that's security. And instead of staring at the motorcade route as it was going to approach Dealey Plaza and getting all tense and ready, he was staring at someone on the overpass bridge. It said like 15, 20 seconds. He was just solid like a statue staring at someone on that distant overpass bridge. Now I think we know why. He had a compatriot, someone he knew was going to fire from that bridge.
I'm starting to think that you think that Lee Harvey Oswald did not do this alone. No, I was kidding. It's interesting. Right. I pick up quickly on this stuff. And here's the thing, right? I never really kind of really thought about it, quite honestly, but it does make sense if this theory, right? This is, we can call it a theory of like everybody who actually had affected the shooting to actually kill President Kennedy. They seemingly, possibly, using my words carefully, all dressed or are police officers, Secret Service, something that no one's gonna raise issue for. Therefore, Lee Harvey Oswald is going to stick out that much more as the patsy.
Yes, he was in a simple T-shirt and jeans. He looks like a weasel. He was the perfect patsy to hire for the conspiracy. He spent time in Russia. He was obsessed with Marxism. He really was a screwball who beat his wife. There's no getting around it. According to one author's research, when he was in Russia, he was being spied on by the KGB, who noted he was trying to build a crude homemade bomb, and Khrushchev was coming to his town in Russia at some point. And they were really worried about Oswald, who wanted to make a name for himself by killing somebody. And it said the bomb was so crude that Oswald even gave up and threw it in a dumpster behind his Russian apartment house. And there they found it. And, it was obvious that this guy is a troublemaker. And he, according to people who knew him, he was a little worm of a man who wanted to be important and famous and being taken seriously. He was a little unstable and easily irritated. And he was not pleasant to be around, had no real friends. So he lived in New Orleans in the summer of '63. That's Carlos Marcello, the gangster territory. There were a number of ties between Oswald indirectly to Marcello. For instance, Oswald's uncle worked as a bookie for Carlos Marcello, the gangster. And I believe there were connections made that summer, and they looked him over and thought, he's perfect. We got to find someone. Right. I think it was mafia initiated by the Marcello organization to shoot President Kennedy, who was involved in the war on organized crime. They were trying to destroy the mafia. So what do you do in a war? You kill or be killed. And the Marcello organization didn't want it traced directly to them. So they wanted a patsy to throw over, and Oswald was convinced to take part in that. Maybe he'll be a big man or something and make the news. And he fell for it, and he went for it. He knew there were other gunmen, but he didn't think he would get caught. It's interesting to note on the documentary, The Men Who Killed JFK, it's run on like History Channel and A&E in the old days. There's a segment, a couple segments, I think, on that bullet hole in the windshield and how witnesses at Parkland Hospital saw the limo when it pulled in, and they started walking over and peeking into it, and they could see this bullet hole. And one of them was a female Dallas doctor, I think she was a surgeon, who said, I'm a big gun rights activist. I fire guns all the time, and I know exactly what that was. It was a bullet hole that entered the front of the windshield and went into the back. And JFK is seen in the Zapruder film waving to people, and then suddenly he stops and he does this. I believe that's when he received a frontal shot to the throat, which the doctors and nurses all at Parkland Hospital said they saw. An entry wound just above the Adam's apple, a small little bullet hole that they performed a tracheotomy on to try to save his life. And in a PBS documentary, you see Nurse Audrey Bell telling the camera, we're treating the president for a small entry wound here. So that was likely the windshield shot that I sent you a photograph and a drawing by an eyewitness. And there's other stories of it, including Paul Landis. He's a Secret Service agent, kept his mouth shut for like 60 plus years. And a year or two ago, he released his autobiography and said when he got to the limo, he also noticed this damage to the windshield, looked down in the back seat and found two kind of gold-colored or copper-colored bullet fragments. And then when Jackie got up out of the car to follow her husband being taken into the hospital, here was a whole intact copper bullet. It probably came from Oswald's rifle, probably fell out of the president's suit jacket. He suffered a wound in the back, an entry wound called the third thoracic vertebrae down in his back. And that at his autopsy at Bethesda Naval Hospital later that night in D.C., one of the doctors is quoted as saying, I can fit the end of my finger into this wound and reach the end of the wound. And they said, that's not necessary. Stop doing that. So, you know, you see that in the movie JFK by Oliver Stone. Right. There's lots of little stories that add up to 2 different or possibly 3 different gunmen who fired on President Kennedy. And what did Jackie say after the shooting? She said, let them see what they've done. And when the shooting was underway, John Connally yelled out, my God, they are going to kill us all. He knew there was a variety of shots coming in at various angles, at least 2 or 3, let's put it that way.
Which seems very mob-like, doesn't it, actually? You know, just around it all. And that is, you know, for those who maybe didn't quite pick up on this, that the point here is, especially with the bullet coming through the windshield, that is the exact opposite direction of where Lee Harvey Oswald was at when he shot.
He fired from behind, above and behind, with a high-powered, noisy rifle. And someone, one of the authors felt that Oswald was recruited with that rifle to draw everyone's attention back, to look back at the depository when the more fatal shots would come in front. And he did fire. A witness from the school book depository said, I heard boom, click, click, boom, click, click, boom, click, click. It's absolutely certain he fired 3 times and then tried to wipe the rifle off and then looked normal and escaped the building. And later he was confronted by a police officer and he murdered him, pulled out a handgun and shot the cop. You don't do that if you're innocent. I mean, exactly. Also, when he was arrested in a Dallas theater, Oswald drew out his pistol again and fired, but it misfired. It like clicked and nothing happened. You don't attempt to kill a cop if you're completely innocent. You say, oh, you got the wrong guy. I'll come along quietly. We'll get this all straightened out. No problem. Instead, he tried to shoot his way out in a theater. And before that, he killed a cop. So you can't tell me that guy was innocent at all.
The mob or whoever put this together must have been just so happy with Lee Harvey Oswald, because you couldn't. I mean, he's fanatical, but he's not overly competent, which is almost what you need in this situation. What I want to do, Paul, is we got questions here. One is about Jack Ruby, which I know we want to get to anyway tonight. Why don't we go ahead and take our first break here? When we come back, we got a lot to get to. We got a lot of questions. This is a great conversation, and I got one of my favorite people to talk us through it tonight. We're talking about the JFK assassination with Paul Blake Smith. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information.
Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. It's that time of year again where the weather is getting nice and it's time to get out of the house for some family fun. Lilliput is the perfect place and is open for the season. Be the first to take on their newest escape room, The Bunker. It's intense, exciting, and totally unforgettable. Prefer spooky? Try the Haunted Mansion. When you're done escaping, hit the mini golf course, go-karts, and jump pads. Lilliput is perfect for parties and group events too. Visit lilliput.net for hours and start your spring adventures at Lilliput.
And if you're watching me on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun on Facebook, please consider sending stars my direction. The reason why I ask for that is that it helps the algorithm for Facebook to make these shows more prominent so other people can watch and enjoy, and we can get more people involved. If you hadn't noticed, we have kind of a community here of people putting in comments, and dare I say, very good comments. And we love to interact with that. It's one way of supporting GhostBox Radio. Another way to support GhostBox Radio is consider signing up as a Patreon subscriber to GhostBox Radio. There has the full archive of my radio collection, 10 years worth of different subjects throughout the year. Plus, we do a lot of stuff. We just put up exclusives as well, early release episodes, all sorts of good things. That starts at $3 per month, and really would appreciate it if you consider joining up because it helps support GhostBox Radio. Go to patreon.com/GhostBox Radio. Now, we have with us tonight our special guest, author Paul Blake Smith. We are talking about the JFK assassination. And Paul, your book on JFK assassination currently unavailable, right?
That is correct. It came out under Argosy Publishing some years ago, and they are now kaput. So I'm going to polish it up and hopefully get it to a new publisher in the next few years, and maybe add some more material from these documents or any other source that leaks information. As we went over just one document, and that was an FBI report from the Dallas District Attorney's Office, in which a number of people said Jack Ruby came in the day before the assassination and handed out business cards and then said, you don't know me, but you will soon. And he knew something was up, and he was supposedly only a kind of spectator for the assassination, and then somehow flipped and went nuts and killed Oswald on a whim or something like this, when a number of authors have pointed out that Ruby really stalked Oswald. He kept going into that police station and kept asking about when he's going to be out, when are they going to transfer him, what time of what day. And he appears in the background of Oswald's press conference where the police hauled him out and asked him some questions. In the back of the room, Jack Ruby corrects a reporter and says, "That's the Fair Play for Cuba Committee." So Ruby was extremely knowledgeable. You could say he knew what was coming. There was one document released a couple of years ago that said, a gentleman said, "I was standing out on the street before the parade was to begin, about a block away from the motorcade route. And Jack Ruby came up to me and said, 'Hey, stick around. There's going to be some fireworks here in a minute.'" And of course, the assassination happened a block away or so. And Ruby turned around and went back into an office building. I don't believe in any way Ruby took part or fired, but he knew what was coming. And supposedly the official story is that he was just a bumbling nightclub owner with a bad temper, and he went nuts at the wrong time and shot Oswald impulsively. So, you know, that story is pretty shaky too.
Well, and didn't he also claim patriotism for shooting? Shooting.
He had he had like 5 or 6 explanations. He wanted to be a hero. He wanted to save Jackie Kennedy the agony of having to go to Dallas and testify in a trial. He wanted to show that Jews have guts. He wanted to wipe that smirk off of Oswald's face. He didn't like the look on his face. There were a couple of other explanations that he gave. I mean, usually you just have one, don't you? Not like 5 or 6.
Well, and imagine, I mean, how it is these days. I mean, imagine someone of what Oswald was arrested for people to have actually fairly close like interactions with. I mean, when they took him out, I mean, if it wasn't Ruby, anybody could have gone up there and just taken a shot at him. You know, I mean, the security is so much different than nowadays, you know?
They did have cops on either side of him, and he was handcuffed to one of them, but that wasn't nearly enough. And that Ruby was seen in and around that police station a number of times that day. He went down the street real quick to send a telegram, and then he went right back. And one person said he did not come down the ramp. In fact, a policeman guarding the ramp of the Dallas police headquarters said he did not come down that ramp. "I stood guard over that ramp." He came from another direction where police cars were parked. So the whole story doesn't hold up officially, but Ruby was associated with the Campisi crime family, the Savello crime family, and the Marcello crime family. To operate his nightclub, he needed strippers, maybe bouncers, and he found these people associated with the mafia that kind of controlled entertainment and nightclubs in those days. So he had his connections. Now, you remember Morton Downey Jr., the talk show host from some years ago?
How can you not, right? For folks our age, absolutely, right?
He said quite seriously on one of his shows that he interviewed Dr. Arthur Ochsner of the Ochsner Cancer Clinic in New Orleans. Ochsner told him that Arthur Ochsner, diagnosed Jack Ruby with fatal cancer. He had inoperable cancer. It was going to take his life in the summer of '63, which means by November, Ruby knew he was going to die anyway. So he was the perfect candidate to go up and shoot Oswald. He didn't have much of a future, and he indeed died of cancer in prison. So it kind of holds together that the mafia put him up to this, and he did it for maybe also to get his name in the history books, I suppose.
How long after he shot Oswald did he die in prison?
I think around New Year's of '67. So he lasted 3.5. I'm sure he got medical treatment. It's free when you're a prisoner and you're famous, but there was no cure for cancer then, and there's no cure for cancer now. Ruby was kind of a little odd himself and not a pleasant person to be around. And it's funny that of all the places when Oswald moved from New Orleans to Dallas, after the summer of '63, he moved to Oak Cliff, just like a mile or two or blocks away from Jack Ruby. So again, the official line from the Warren Commission is, we couldn't find, based on the evidence forwarded to us from the FBI, any link between Oswald and Ruby. And Gerald Ford, many years later, was interviewed and said, well, we couldn't find it in the time we were allotted. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. So, they needed to get the Warren report out in time to convince voters in October of '64, just before the election, that LBJ was completely innocent. And it was just Oswald, this nutty screwball, alone, when it was more than that.
Amazing. We talked a little bit about the wounds that JFK endured in it, and you had sent me some imagery, and I know we might be going over stuff that we talked about earlier, but I wondered if we want to show any of that for folks to see.
Yeah, those are simple drawings made by Dr. Crenshaw, a surgeon who helped try to save JFK's life in the Parkland Hospital emergency room. And years later, he drew what he saw, and that's that a fist-size hole was in the back of JFK's head, and he suffered a small entry wound up here, like to the right temple, and it blew out the back of his head. Even this Secret Service guard who died just recently, Clint Hill, adhered to this story and said, yeah, I saw a large wound in the back of the president's head when I was jumping onto the back of the limo, when Jackie was trying to retrieve a large piece of the president's skull, which was probably a large chunk of this back exit wound. And they are trying to claim that somehow Oswald's rifle did this, when always an entry wound is a small wound and an exit wound blows it out on the other side of the body. So as we can see from these drawings, simple but very effective, one of the eyewitnesses who worked on JFK said this was the nature of the head wound, and it was pretty, it was just fatal. They knew he was not going to make it when they wheeled him into the trauma center, the emergency room, and took a look at it. There was barely a pulse, and then he died officially on the table. But the minute that frontal shot, probably from the knoll, hit him, he was deceased right there, frankly, and he didn't say a word. He just collapsed over into Jackie Kennedy's lap.
If Oswald did hit him from behind in the back of the head, it would have blown out most of his face then, basically.
Yeah, really. It should have gone into the back of the head and just blown out his enormous, maybe his eyes or nose or something. It's pretty gruesome to contemplate, but that's not what happened. And so many people said they heard a shot, at least one shot from the knoll, and that it corresponds with this fatal wound. And so the whole thing is just so rigged up to make us believe then it was important to the country, I guess, to move forward and get over this. Just say Oswald did it alone. He was a nut, and he was firing. He did kill a cop and tried to kill more that day. So just blame it on him and let's sweep it under the rug. And another factor is that there's like tens of thousands of documents that the government did. If Oswald was just a kook who did this alone, why would you keep all this from the American public? There should be no reason to hide these documents for 60 plus years. So, and some of them are redacted. There should be no cause for redaction or to omit documents. And so, the government was covering up. And I hate conspiracies and cover-ups. That term is thrown out too many times. But let's look quickly at Watergate. The Watergate burglars conspired to break into the Watergate Hotel and tap their telephones and snap photos illicitly of Democratic Party documents, and they were snooping around when they got caught. They conspired to do this. And then Nixon and some of his henchmen conspired to try to cover it up. So we do know that actual conspiracies in government do happen. And there may be even some ties between some of the Cubans who were in the Watergate break-in and possibly the gunmen who were hired by the mafia to execute Kennedy It's often overlooked, but Lee Oswald lived kind of catacorner to a house on Harlandale Street, right near his boarding house in Oak Cliff. And it was full of Cuban exiles who vacated the building just the day of the assassination. After Kennedy was shot, they took off and never heard from him again. Oh. So, extremely suspicious there.
Well, when also talking about the wounds for JFK, my friend Wade, who I think might be listening tonight, he sent me, which I didn't know about this book. I'm sure you did. Called 26 Seconds. Alexandra Zapruder wrote the book about the Zapruder film, and looking at that. When the big shot that we see debris flying from President Kennedy is all going the opposite direction of where he should have been shot.
Yeah. I thought it was suspicious at first, but apparently it's true. When Zapruder turned over the film, government agents took it and flew it all the way to Washington and took it to CIA headquarters. And what a mistake. They certainly eliminated a few frames of it that were most telling. To this day, some of those frames have never shown up. And there's a kind of a black inky area over the president's back of the head wound. And people who have seen the film and examined it very carefully say this has been slightly doctored or altered. And even that we can't completely trust. Within the past year or so, I heard a rumor that someone else had a home movie taken from Dealey Plaza, and that it shows what really happened, and they want to get this out. And so far, it hasn't come out. I think a few sources said there were police or FBI agents who were absconding cameras that day. Perhaps benignly, like, we need to look into this film footage, and they never got him back. So that kind of holds that this could possibly be true.
That'd be something. What if there was this sort of smoking gun footage the whole time that just clearly showed everything from a direction that would have shown perhaps from like the grassy knoll or whatever else? There's so much interesting stuff about this that it never gets old to me. Before I want to start a new subject, why don't we go just take our next break? I have some more questions in the comments. There's stuff that I want to bring up. Paul, I'm sure there's stuff that you want to talk about too. So let's go ahead, take that break, come back, talk more JFK. Folks, put your questions in the comments. We'll try to get to them, and we'll just continue this conversation. What else about the JFK assassination? Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information.
Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. It's that time of year again where the weather is getting nice and it's time to get out of the house for some family fun. Lilliput is the perfect place and is open for the season. Be the first to take on their newest escape room, The Bunker. It's intense, exciting, and totally unforgettable. Prefer spooky? Try the Haunted Mansion. When you're done escaping, hit the mini golf course, go-karts, and jump pads. Lilliput is perfect for parties and group events too. Visit lilliput.net for hours and start your spring adventures at Lilliput.
And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We are going to have a conversation with Simon Bone, and we're going to be talking about his new book. His new book is Verified Near-Death Experiences. Now, I have to admit, we did pre-record this episode because he is in the UK, so it's kind of tough for him. I mean, I see people in my comments who are actually in the UK right now, but Simon preferred to pre-record it. But don't let that stop you from listening tomorrow, because what Simon has to say is very interesting and very important. I am pretty sure you're going to really enjoy the episode. So check that out tomorrow. Wednesday, we have author Daniel Myers coming on, talking about his book series, The Knight's Trial, and just a whole lot of great conversation ahead. Just like right now, we are talking with author Paul Blake Smith, and we're talking about the JFK assassination. And Paul, where do you want to go? I have people who have some stuff in the comments to talk about. Do you want to go somewhere else? You tell me what you'd like to do.
The name of the show is GhostBox, and you talk about a Minneapolis tour that showed haunted sites with ghosts. I really don't have a story of my own, but I thought I'd point out a quick one in a fresh new book I've been reading. You've heard of Pickfair from Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, a very famous house in Hollywood in Beverly Hills. And in the book, it talks about Pia Zadora, the rather famous singer-actress who briefly rose to fame. In the 1990s, she married a billionaire, and they bought Pickfair. And after a couple of years, they tore the whole thing down, almost everything. Just a couple of things were left. And they asked her, why did you do this? And she said, termites. We had to get rid of it because it was termite infested. A couple of years after that, she revealed the real reason. There was a ghost that kept bothering them, scaring them, haunting them. It was a laughing woman who told them that she had committed suicide in the building after, like, Douglas Fairbanks turned her down or something. And so they had this real life ghost, and they brought in an exorcist, tried to get rid of the ghost, and it didn't work. And the ghost kept showing up. So they said, let's move out of here and just bulldoze the whole thing. And I thought, well, that's a fresh story no one on your show may have heard before. And we'll just toss that in, even though it has nothing to do with JFK.
And that's I love that story, and I need to bring in some people to talk about old Hollywood at some point. That is one of those great stories. It's interesting. You and I were going to talk about this to a certain extent. This isn't exactly the way about it, but Damien had said only reason I can see why it's not been fully discussed is the culprits are still alive, and I would suspect that that's not necessarily the case, as we're now looking at 62 years since it happened. But so many eyewitnesses just happened to die in strange circumstances. People who were associated with Oswald, like Guy Bannister, died in mid-64. Another pilot that he worked with in New Orleans just happened to die. A number of people associated with the mafia and people in Dallas met with untimely fates. So dead men tell no tales. So I think it's an interesting theory why you would not want to reveal it all. But I'm afraid that the mafia's method of operation so often was to involve like someone from the CIA or someone they knew in the government, and then hold it over their heads as blackmail in future negotiations on things. And they probably did the same thing. You don't want us to reveal your assistance in us in this Kennedy assassination, so you better let this mafia off the trial, off the hook on his trial, or something like that. I don't know if I can say it out loud, but there was a man involved in the Secret Service who was involved in planning, and he operated the motorcade route. And there's a Secret Service expert named Vincent Palomera. I highly recommend him for your show,
who put together a series of books on what the Secret Service knew and how the whole thing was so bogus that Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. He said in 1992 he was told by a key Secret Service agent that the parade route was changed to accommodate going by Oswald's place of business, that he told the House Select Committee on this in the late 70s in a closed door session, and that this was one of the truths that got hushed up, that maybe someone planning the parade route knew about the mafia plan and helped in any way he could, like scaling back the Secret Service and the police for the parade route and leaving Kennedy open from in front and on the side to be assassinated. And when you see the video, you're just astounded. Like, there's no security around him at all. No. Normally you have Secret Service walk alongside the car, put their hands on it, look around protecting him, and that was not done. There were no cops on motorcycles on either side. They were in back, told not to go past the rear tires of the limo, and they stayed back. And there's all sorts of steps that were taken to strip Kennedy's security. And Mr. Palomero, if you have him on someday, he can go into that in more detail.
And was the route approved by, I think we talked about this last time you're on, and I think I remember the answer, but I'm going to ask the question. Was the route approved by LBJ?
Johnson pretty much stayed hands off in the run up to the motorcade, and he was in a car that was behind the Secret Service car, which was directly behind the Kennedy car. And LBJ is said to have been ducking down in the back seat. This is according to Senator Ralph Yarborough, who was in that back seat with him just before the shots rang out. So it gives you the idea that Johnson, who was hunched over a radio, listening to some sort of radio receiver during the parade while waving to people, got a message, and they told him, you might want to bend over and tie your shoe or something right now. And right. In this photograph taken of Dealey Plaza, you can see his car, and in the back seat you see the head and face of Lady Bird and Senator Ralph Yarborough, and there's no LBJ, and he was a very tall, big man who should have stuck out like a sore thumb, pretty much proving Yarborough's story that he was ducking down in the back seat just before the shots rang out.
And yet he's okay with Lady Bird being possibly open to.
Oh, you go ahead and just say, yeah.
Yeah, one of us has to keep our heads up here. I mean, and I think that answers the question that Damien had about the culprits and stuff. It's not necessarily the fact that the people who did it are alive or not. It's more of like the trust factor in the U.S. government of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that the president of the United States, who became president of the United States because of this, had a hand in the assassination of a president of the United States. I mean, that alone, it's bigger than that. I understand, but there's so much to it.
Yeah. I don't think Johnson was dumb enough to get involved in the planning. He didn't really have to. He just wanted to benefit from it. And E. Howard Hunt said on his deathbed, Johnson knew about the plan, wanted it done, and even kept urging, like, are you going to get this done? Let's get this done. And he wanted Kennedy out of the way. He was obsessed his whole adult life on becoming president. And so Johnson got what he wanted. The conspirators took out the obstacle to his path to the White House, his path to power. And it probably made him deliriously happy, but he had to act all sad or at least stoic. When he was in Parkland Hospital, they drove him to the hospital, and Secret Service were all around him that day. And he is said by JFK's secretary to have blurted out, "It's a conspiracy. There's been a conspiracy." And that is known in legal parlance as an excited utterance that you can use in a court trial. What you blurt out at the moment of a traumatic incident or something. And so even from the start, Johnson admitted there was a conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. Whether he took an active part or just encouraged it, we don't know to this day. I doubt if any documents that really have juicy stuff that'll reveal a lot were around for the last 60 years to be released to the public. They're going to purge those documents from files a long time ago.
Absolutely. There's those calls that obviously all calls in the White House were recorded. Too bad, President Nixon didn't know that. But anyway, there's calls that were recorded, right? And there's a lot of recordings of President Johnson calling Jackie Kennedy just to keep checking in and stuff. I'm sure, it's really interesting. I mean, and the effect that LBJ had on the country. I mean, it's a lot of what ifs, at that point of what if, he wasn't president. It's amazing how this led, like, really reshaped and redirected the country.
There was a document I think I sure should mention on this show, released not too long ago, that assessed the Kennedy family and said that Jackie and Robert had been telling people in their inner circle this was a domestic plot. They did not believe Oswald acted alone, but they kept their mouths generally shut and didn't rock the boat. Supposedly, Robert Kennedy said in his last month alive that if elected president in 1968, I am going to reopen the case. And that may have sealed his fate, but that's a whole different matter. It's something that it was a more conservative era overall. Even if you were a Democrat, a so-called liberal, you didn't say certain things and reveal certain things, and the government was very powerful. J. Edgar Hoover was in charge practically of the whole government. If he got a file on you, a dossier, and it recorded some financial misdoings or sexual misconduct, he would bring it to your attention. Now he says, well, I've got this information, and we're going to keep the lid on this, but you really should vote on this legislation or do this if you know what's good for you. He probably didn't say it in quite that direct a manner, but Hoover was extremely powerful.
Yes, he was. He very, and I don't think today we quite understand that as time has gone on, how one person had so much power, and like you said, possibly the most powerful person in the country at his height. Yeah.
He had contacts that would send in reports to FBI agents, call them up. One classic story is that Lucille Ball, the famous TV show from I Love Lucy, went to the doctor, found out she was pregnant. Well, the doctor's secretary was an FBI contact, picked up the phone and called an FBI agent who called Desi, and Desi knew by the time Lucy got home from her doctor's appointment because of all these FBI connections and blabbermouths that told them. So, that's an example of in showbiz, there were FBI informants, and in Washington, D.C., and you might even get a little payola for, information. Right. And there were like bellhops, nurses, secretaries, security guards that wanted a little extra money. So they squealed on what was going on. And Hoover kept his files right to the end and then had his secretary destroy them. Massive shredding and burning in 1972 when he died.
Amazing. And Lucille Ball, of course, during that period of time, she would have been under a lot of scrutiny for communism. And but that's a whole other story here. I want to get back to another comment, if I may, that was early on in the program, but I want to get back to it, talking about the car and how JFK was shot. James had said the driver was also suspected as firing a shot from within the car. I've heard this, but no one really talks about that. I'm assuming that's not necessarily accepted.
I thought, hey, is there something to it? The driver clearly turns around and looks at Kennedy, and I examined the photos close up and the film footage, and he's not firing a car. Firing a gun in the car. He's just looking back like, what's going on there? Maybe after he saw this bullet go through the windshield, and he could see Kennedy gagging and then rocketing back in his seat from the shot from the front or the side front. Clearly showing that they were under assault from at least 2 or 3 angles, and they slowed down, not sure what to do, and then he took off, and it was too late. But I don't know if the driver was involved or not. But at first I thought, well, that's interesting. Is he holding a gun? But you look at it very, very closely. No, that's not what happened.
It also, if I'm not mistaken, it was considered that he would have to be quite the shot with the angle and how everything would have worked for him to be able to get a gun pointed back that direction.
And in broad daylight with witnesses on both sides of the street and his Secret Service buddy in the other half of the front seat. And he did all this in front of Governor Connolly. It just didn't happen that way.
Is there, as we have about 2 minutes left, a little less, is there a theory that you think is the most preposterous that you've ever heard? I mean, apart from Lee Oswald actually doing it.
One of them came around a few years ago. A guy put out a book and said the Secret Service accidentally discharged a firearm and shot Kennedy in the head from behind. And they looked into this, and it was absolute nonsense. And the publishers, I think, had to apologize for publishing this book. That was a wild one. Another one, that there was a manhole near Dealey Plaza and someone was firing from the sewer. And so they sent somebody down there, and the angle was all wrong. You couldn't have possibly shot President Kennedy and gotten away with that, even if you were able to crouch down in this little manhole, which had an opening. So there are a number of theories that have not held water. But again, I'm convinced there was a conspiracy. The mafia wanted the president dead, and they, as soon as they got rid of him, Attorney General Robert Kennedy was devastated, did little about organized crime, and then quit entirely as Attorney General. And prosecutions against organized crime went sharply downhill during the Johnson administration. Johnson had his own ties to the mafia. You kind of had to, if you were a politician in those days and you wanted to get elected, you took money from wherever under the table if you had to. And so it's kind of seedy that our politicians were linked up maybe through associates with mobsters, but that was life back then. They were awfully powerful gangsters.
Absolutely. My goodness. You got to get your book in order and get it back out for us to read. I mean, we've been saying this. I don't know how many times I have to tell you this, Paul. Let's get going here. I don't know what the whole
I'm doing that process to my Cape Girardeau UFO crash of 1941. I'm halfway through it, all the footnotes and the editing and polishing. So I really haven't had time to look at too many JFK documents or my book. And I'll point out that the Nixon Gleason story should be a movie within the next year, and you might see an actor portraying me in the movie, believe it or not. They'll have a movie about Art Bell, and one of his guests on his show will be Paul Blake Smith. This is what I'm told. I don't think I'll be playing me. I guess I'm not the type. And then supposedly they're also going to make a movie out of the Eisenhower encounter. So there's a scoop for your listeners tonight. And hopefully the recession will hold off, that movies will get made and get funded, and these things will happen in the coming years.
That is great news. Congratulations on that. We got to go. We'll be back tomorrow. Paul, always good talking to you. Everyone, have a good night.